Hello there, welcome to the Elastica Coaster channel. It's still lockdown, but what I'd like to do is another list video. Now, I've already done the 5 quickest ways to be a better stage actor, so I thought we'd do the 5 quickest way to be a better screen actor, in my opinion, bearing in mind there are people who, know this stuff better than me, but from my perspective, the quickest way to be a better screen actor as opposed to a stage actor. Now, the one that I'll sort of say for free here, this isn't one of the 5, but is not to underestimate the difference between the two. I don't know many people who try to make the argument, but it's the same thing, but I've certainly seen it. It really is not. Obviously, kind of the end goal of giving a credible performance might be the same, but your relationship in a screen environment is fundamentally different. You're in collaboration with this whole other entity, which is a camera, and that totally changes because the camera then has the relationship with the audience. Whereas in a stage environment, you have the relationship with the audience directly. So, kind of the hashtag #1 with an asterisk is don't underestimate the difference between stage and screen acting. But that's not really the real one, but don't do that. They are fundamentally different crafts, even though they do overlap. So the actual #1 is to get rid of your performance voice. This, to some extent, can apply to stage acting a little bit as well, but you are still required to have a fundamental vocal energy underlying all of your stage work that just can't be there when you're doing screen acting. You have to remove any sense of, I'm doing some acting now. Like, the moment you do something like that, it stops having any function on screen. You have to unlearn, if you like, that propensity for projection, for placing extra energy, for sort of putting fire underneath your voice, and instead commit to all of your acting performance at the base projection level that you, as an ordinary human behaving, would do. Everything when you're on stage needs to have this kind of underlying fire burning underneath it. And most screen work, you need to get rid of that. Because the size of the performance, we'll come to this a little bit again in another point, but the size of the performance can't be the same because the demands on what it is are totally different. Now, there are different levels of stage acting depending on the size of the space that you're working in, because really, it's also the case that if you're in a small studio theatre, you should be giving a different scale of performance to if you're in the Royal Shakespeare Theatre or something like that, or the National, or the Olivier Space in the National. But when it comes to collaborating with a camera that is, well, this far away now, quite often, and even if it was further away than that, you can't perform to the same size, and that's particularly manifest in your voice, and there's something to really strongly unlearn there. #2 is to learn very quickly to take personal control for yourself. Your director, if you're working on screen, is likely to be very different than a director on stage. They have their own agendas, they have their own vision. They are not there to facilitate your performance in a way that a director is usually there to do, particularly in a naturalistic scripted play on stage. So you need to drive everything that you do. You need to ask questions sensibly when you have a question. You can't come across as too, you are the hired hand coming in to do the acting. Your director isn't there to be an acting coach. And unlike in the theatre, where probably your director could be an acting coach if they were called upon to do so, 9 times, probably more out of 10, in screen work, the director wouldn't be capable of directing you to act even if they wanted to. Their direction is going to be far more practical and relate to what they want from you rather than your actual craft of acting. So that's #2, to take personal control for yourself. #3, Acting for screen has a lot of downtime. Anybody who's ever done any of it will tell you that. It is, I won't say boring necessarily, because some people find the whole process very fascinating, but there are an awful lot of times when you are not going to be doing anything and you're going to be standing there drinking coffee or sitting on a bench, or if you're famous, in a trailer. So number 3 is to find techniques, or to practice techniques, to mentally switch very quickly between suddenly being switched on and suddenly being switched off. That is a technique in and of itself that you need to learn, that ability to sort of to switch on. Now, you can do things in stage work like do press-ups on the side of the stage or really G yourself up, but because of issue number 1, getting rid of your performance voice and getting rid of that fire that's burning underneath you, performance energy, you can't do maybe some of those easier things when it comes to stage work when it comes to screen. It needs to be more of a mental switch on and mental switch off rather than something that you can instigate really strongly physically. It's something that you need to have a level of self-awareness about, and a kind of planning that almost has nothing to do with the acting in and of itself, that allows you to move in and out of being able to really, really intensely work. Because if you're on set for 6 hours, there's a good chance that you will be intensely working for 20 minutes of that, if that, and then doing nothing for over 5 hours. Number 4 is to establish the parameters of what you can do, and that means your collaboration with the director as it can be. Just because they're not necessarily an acting instructor or there to tell you how to act, they do have a vision of what they want. And if they want you to stand in a certain place or have that relationship to somebody or do that physical action then, and you'll be a lot of things that an acting director will probably never do because they relate to acting technique. So it's very unlikely that in a theatre they might say, okay, well, put your hand up to that person's face then. A screen director will do that, and it will be absolutely a part of the design of the shot, and they might be very precise in terms of what they want you to do and when. There will always be an infinite variety of ways that you can do it, but if you're not on the ball and you don't establish the parameters of what you can do, it may just feel that they are narrowing down the whole time and that you no longer have any choice as to how to perform it. That's where establishing the parameters of what you can do and then operating really precisely and finding all the varieties that exist within that, probably some tactical variation, probably some objective-based variation, and sometimes, once you're used to it, just arbitrarily physically doing things very slightly differently so that you're providing them with a range of shots to choose from. Which is another thing that you do on screen that you don't do on stage. Provide them with a range of options to choose from consciously. Number 5 is to understand the shot and your director and what they want from the piece of work. Usually in most screen acting courses you'll be told about the different shots and the different scales of shots, but it's a problem that you see all the time, all the way up to films, as to not understanding the shot that you have. I will use the classic example for this of an issue where sort of interaction between director and actor totally broke down. I will always use the Star Wars prequel series for this, because you've got a lot of very, very good actors giving very, very bad performances, or what ultimately became very, very bad performances, where bad performances on the stage are pretty much entirely the fault of the actor. Bad performances on screen are collaborative bad performances that happen from a breakdown between director and actor, and can be done even with bad writing. So let's take that famous line, I don't like sand, it's coarse and rough and irritating and it gets everywhere. Now, famously, that is an abysmally delivered line. It's also famously an abysmally written line, and you can't do anything about that as an actor. It's not a great line. But what you have to understand is that between the line and the direction, you need to understand what the director is going for. And that is not something that was understood by Hayden Christensen, who is a good actor, and certainly was not something that was communicated by George Lucas, who probably, had he communicated it clearly, would have gotten a better performance out of his actor. Now, if you watch that shot, and I suggest that you do before you come back to this video, because there are plenty of clips on YouTube of that scene and that moment. So do that now. Right, so that shot was a medium shot. It was shot from some distance. Now, even though the delivery of that line wasn't bad, I assure you, had Hayden Christensen been in close-up doing the exact same performance, it would have come across better. If you'd been right close into his face, that line would not have been quite as bad in its impact as it was, but he wasn't. He was in a mid-shot that showed his whole torso, performing as if he was in an extreme close-up. Now, what George Lucas appears to have been going for in Attack of the Clones, again, regardless of the scale to which it succeeded, is aiming for influence from classic sort of medieval, capital R romantic knight's love, courtly love, and sort of combining it with the sensibilities of like a swords and sandals epic type film. And if you look at those kinds of films, and the people who plenty of bad writing in those films, performed effectively by people who are performing with far more of their body and leaning in considerably more to the imagery of those lines, even if that imagery is silly, than Hayden Christensen does in the delivery of that line. And I don't think it's all his fault. I think this was directed by Lord George Lucas not communicating that goal to him, because Hayden Christensen's probably capable enough of delivering that line 2 increments larger, which is what it needs at least, and performing with his whole body, and performing knowing that he's got much more space to work with and traverse, rather than hitting one spot, moving almost nothing, and delivering as though he is in an extreme close-up. So understand your shot is the last point that I'm going to make. Anyway, I hope that's of use, and I will see you again next time. Stay safe.